tape. J.J. Joe, former Baylor starting quarterback and also Baylor radio analyst, joins us, Sic'Em 365 Radio, 365 Sports. J.J., thanks for your time. When they made the decision that Blake Shapen would be the quarterback, the thought was, and the message was, that he could give them more oomph on offense. Did you see that Saturday night?
Well, hey, guys, thanks once again for having me on. But, Dave, that really was a tough environment. I mean, we talked about that before, I think right after the previous game with Albany. It's really tough when you go in a venue like that. You're at altitude, and they're really ramped up because they won't pay back. They have a veteran team, and they really changed up the approach to defend us. And sometimes that's really tough because they really, I don't think they jumped everything they did last year, but I just don't remember a lot of the looks that I saw this year. And part of that may have been because Gary was not playing. It was Blake instead of Gary. But nevertheless, you didn't see the pop you wanted to see.
JJ, how do you get over road woes for a young team when you have the road schedule they have coming up? Do they have to just channel all that negative energy out that they experienced the other night?
Well, I mean, it's a learning thing for this team. I remember, guys, we talked last week. See, some of these guys are now in high leverage moments. Dylan Doyle and guys like that have been in these moments. Dylan got put out of the game. I forget if it was the third or fourth quarter. We missed him, but Tyron Brown came in, played well. But, for some of these guys in these situations, you were watching. Not all of them. We got a lot of guys who played, but now coach is relying on you to go make those plays. And so when you're on the road, you got to just assume this is going to be a tight game. It's just the way it is, especially when you have a team like BYU that, to be honest with you, I don't know how they weren't ranked in the top 20 at the beginning of the season. I just didn't get it. A lot of that has to do with, media stuff. So this is a veteran team, a lot of veteran players, guys sometimes at 24, 25, 26. You're playing in their place. They're smarting from last year, and you go on the road. So when you play a tight game like that, you just can't have 14 penalties, right? You have 14 penalties, and you're just probably not going to get out of there unless they turn the ball over to you a couple times. And those penalties that we had, think about it. They came at really the most inopportune time. So you got to clean it up if you're going to win on the road.
As you say, there are going to be a bunch of bigger games on the road as they move along. But how would you describe that atmosphere in Provo? What would you kind of compare it to, if anything?
Man, it's hard. I'm telling you, it's different. It's nighttime games, so that was really tough there, Craig. But I think as far as venues to play, I can't think of probably a significantly tougher place. People say, well, what about the big venues like, OU, which is tough. Yeah, it's loud, it's tough. Or Texas. Texas can be very tough. I think Lubbock at night it's hard to win in Lubbock. I can't explain it to you. There's only about 55 to 50, maybe 60,000 there, but Lubbock is just a tough place to play, and we have to go there. This kind of reminded me of that, but I think you throw in the altitude, and I think that gives another layer. And then you're playing at 9:15 your time. That really doesn't help either. So it's a really unique place, man. I'm kind of glad they're in the Big 12.
I was saying, I'm a night out, JJ, and even I was struggling there. Like when, it's one thing to watch football late at night. It's another thing when you're invested in who you're watching late at night, and that game's
exactly.
that game's a back and forth one like that. I really think that, moving forward, teams are now going to look, okay, if we're playing at BYU, when do we play them and what time does that kick off? Because that seems like it's going to be one of those games like, playing in Lubbock at night, like you said, or it's one of those wild cards on the schedule you're going to have to kind of circle and be extra ready for.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Plus the altitude. I mean, we don't think about it, but I mean, you're playing at 4,000, 4,500, 5,000 feet. And, that in itself takes you a little bit of time to get used to. So it is a very unique place.
JJ, Dave Aranda mentioned that he saw some of those eyes, some of the inexperienced guys who may have been a part of the team but haven't played much. He then mentioned trust a couple of times to me yesterday when I sat down and talked to him. He's not talking about there's any kind of turmoil or toxicity, nothing like that. But he kept telling them, about the storm that was coming because I think he knew what they were going to experience. How simple is it to get through that now that you've experienced it?
I think these guys have learned quite a bit because they do have a number. They will really, guys who are veterans that have played in high leverage moments on both sides of the ball, right? Especially at your line. And every year it's interesting. I tell people every year you have to get used to stuff in football. Football is just not a natural game to run and tackle and be hit and say, I'm going to get up, let's do it again. But the level of intensity, it takes time to get used to it. And when you play Albany and then you go play BYU, I like it in that order, but the level of intensity on the road is so huge. And you saw, for those, I watched the Alabama-Texas game. Texas, to me, like the better team the whole night, right? But that was the perfect storm for Alabama. Texas, they had a coach that knew Alabama well. They had players who had been talked about how much they're going to get dogged the whole off season, and Alabama got out of there by the skin of their chin. And this year we had the same thing. We were going to BYU. BYU had been told all year, remember how they beat the snot out of you? They're more physical than you. And their whole offseason was game planning for Baylor. Trust me. Their whole offseason has been, hey, South Florida, yeah, we're going to game plan for you, but, we'll probably beat you. It was for Baylor. And you could tell because they broke out stuff that, I don't think they showed last week.
J.J. Joe, former Baylor quarterback and also Baylor Radio with us, 365 Sports.
Texas State last year, J.J., I don't want to say gave Baylor a run for their money. They made it tense, and that was the first game of last year. How does Baylor avoid that this year, even though these teams are both a little bit different?
Yeah, I think last year, that was after a really tough campaign in 20, ran his first run at it. So, and they were trying to, get used to Coach Grimes, the offense, and Texas State did a great job. Their quarterback made a lot of huge plays for them last year. This year, I think it's all about intensity. It's going to be an 11 o'clock game. Hey, so almost the opposite of last week. And you just got to bring energy. And if Baylor plays a clean game like I know they can, I think, Texas State is much better than they have been. But Baylor should win this game running away. But they have to bring that level of intensity or they'll find themselves in a game going into the late second half, fourth quarter, and then it's just, Katie bar the door.
JJ, what did you see from Blake Shapen, good, bad, ugly, otherwise, on Saturday night?
I saw a young man that had some experience, but learned a really valuable lesson along with his teammates last night. Like, this stuff is hard. It's really hard, and you're going to teams will watch you on tape, and that's why I always say that I like quarterbacks before they get out of college and go to the next level if they're next level talent. I need to see you play 3-4 years in college. Why? Because teams adjust. These guys watch Blake Shapen on tape, the 4 or 5 games he's had significant action, and they schemed the dude. They schemed him. They schemed their pass game. They knew what he liked to do, and they took it away. And they said, okay, we're taking this away. What are you going to do? And we just were not ready. He's not experienced enough. We're not experienced enough together yet on the edge and at quarterback and all that to adjust in game and then go out and execute at the level of a top 10 team. BYU is a top 12 to 10 team, right? And we're not right. We're not there yet at those positions. And we'll learn. I think he learned a ton on Saturday night, and he'll be much better. I know he will.
I got the impression from Miranda that the offensive line has not really had that edge or grit. Now, listen, they were fantastic last year, and they still might be really good, but that they might maybe ramp up the individual or position drills this week to try to see if they can get that edge back. And Mateos always talks about grit. Have you seen that?
Yeah, it's hard against Albany. So this week, Dave, it was the first time, and I tell you, it's the first time they've said, oh, this is what this is like. This is what we were doing last year when we beat Texas, we beat OU. This is what we were doing. We beat Ole Miss. Oh, this is what I have no doubt that up front our guys will adjust. But it takes some time because I'm going to tell you, those guys from BYU meant it. They meant it, and they were coming. And when I saw the game early, how they were attacking our line and we were catching them, this is going to be a rough one. And it turned out to be a really rough one.
So, when you're 12-2 and you had the best year in the history of Baylor football, the expectations are hard. I don't think anyone thought this would be a cakewalk, especially when the receivers went out. Then you started thinking, well, maybe. But obviously, Roberts was a tough guy to handle. What are your thoughts? Does this change who you think Baylor is in any particular way?
Au contraire, my friend. Think about this, how this game flows. I mean, you're in this hornet's nest, and they talk about what the receivers are missing. They have some pretty good guys there. Those guys that played behind Puka Nakua and Gunnar Romney, those are good receivers. They're solid receivers. So I think, if you look at the flow of the game, BYU takes the lead. Baylor comes back and scores and takes the lead. BYU goes back, scores, they take the lead. Baylor comes back again and takes the lead. BYU ties us. Then they get ahead of us. Then Baylor comes back and ties the game again. This team they have that championship DNA. It's just that when you're that inexperienced on the edge and you're trying to pull it together, and on top of that, right, you have 14 penalties on the road, and some of them were huge, man. They continue drives that kill drives. You're just not going to be the top 12 to 10 team. You're just not. It's just fact. But this team can do if this is the only game you lose when we get to the end of the season, dude, you're going to be knocking on the door to a player. But I think BYU may have one in them, right? One loss, maybe two in them, maybe max. But it's going to take a good team to beat them.
Thank you, man. Great to have you on the show, as always, when we can, JJ, every Tuesday just after 5. Great to have your insight. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
JJ Joe, former Baylor quarterback, Baylor Radio, with us Tuesdays at 5:05 on this show.
If Baylor